The Tennessee mountains held their breath in the pre-dawn darkness, mist clinging to ancient oaks like forgotten secrets. Marcus Blackwood adjusted his hiking boots one final time, the leather creaking in the silence that only deep wilderness could provide. Beside him, his wife Linda pulled her auburn hair into a practical ponytail, her movements efficient despite the early hour. "Dad, why couldn't we just sleep in like normal people on vacation?" Tyler's voice carried the trademark exasperation of a 16-year-old forced into family bonding time. He emerged from their rented cabin, all gangly limbs and bedhead, his younger sister Zoe trailing behind with considerably more enthusiasm. "Because normal people don't get to see sunrise from Eagle's Peak," Marcus replied, shouldering his backpack. At 42, he still moved with the purposeful stride of someone who'd spent years navigating courtrooms, but these mountains stripped away his lawyer's veneer, revealing the small-town Tennessee boy he'd once been. Linda checked her watch, a habit from 20 years of teaching high school English, where every minute mattered. "We've got perfect weather, guys. No rain in the forecast, temperature's ideal. When's the next time we'll all be together like this?" She had a point, and they all knew it. Tyler would be heading to college in 2 years. Zoe was becoming increasingly involved in competitive swimming, and Marcus's law practice in Nashville seemed to demand more hours each month. This cabin rental in the Smoky Mountains represented a rare alignment of schedules and shared purpose. "Fine, but I'm documenting this torture for future therapy sessions," Tyler muttered, though he was already moving toward the trailhead. Zoe giggled, her 14-year-old energy undaunted by the 5:30 a.m. start. The family fell into a comfortable hiking rhythm as they entered the forest proper. Marcus took point, consulting the trail map despite having memorized the route. Linda walked beside Zoe, pointing out early wildflowers and identifying bird calls, the teacher in her never fully off duty. Tyler brought up the rear, earbuds in but volume low enough to maintain safety and family connection. "This trail's been here since the 1800s, Marcus explained, as they navigated a particularly rocky section. "My grandfather used to tell stories about running these ridges as a kid, back when families lived off the land up here." "Were people really that tough back then? Or is that just how old people remember everything?" Zoe asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Linda laughed. "Probably a bit of both, honey. Though I think every generation faces challenges that seem impossible to the ones that come after." The conversation drifted as they climbed, morning light gradually filtering through the canopy. Marcus felt his shoulders relax for the first time in months. The Pemberton case had been consuming his practice, a wrongful termination suit against one of Nashville's most prominent development companies. The client had solid grounds, but the opposition's legal team seemed to have unlimited resources and an uncanny ability to make witnesses disappear or change their testimony. 2 hours into the hike, Tyler called for a water break. They'd reached a plateau with scattered boulders and a clear view of the valley below. The family spread out on the rocks, sharing trail mix and taking in the vista. "Dad, what's that?" Zoe pointed to a metallic glint about 50 yards off the main trail, barely visible through the undergrowth. Marcus followed her gaze, squinting. "Probably just trash someone dumped. People can be inconsiderate, even out here." "Looks too big to be regular trash," Tyler observed, suddenly interested. "And it's kind of buried." Linda stood, brushing crumbs from her hiking pants. "We should check it out. If it's garbage, we can at least report the location to the Park Service." They made their way through the dense brush, Marcus leading with Tyler close behind. The metallic object revealed itself gradually, a corner of what appeared to be a large shipping container, partially buried and overgrown with years of vegetation. "Well, that's not something you see every day," Marcus murmured, running his hand along the rusted metal surface. The container was clearly industrial, about 20 feet long, with faded numbers and markings that time and weather had rendered mostly illegible. "How did it get way up here?" Zoe wondered aloud. "There's no road for miles." Tyler was already circling the container, teenager's curiosity overriding any sense of caution. "There's a door on this side, and it's not completely buried." Marcus felt a familiar lawyer's instinct stirring, the same feeling he got when a case took an unexpected turn. "Tyler, don't touch anything yet. We need to think about this." But it was too late. Tyler had already grasped the container's handle and was pulling with surprising effectiveness. Years of football had given him considerable strength, and the door, though rusted, gave way with a grinding screech that seemed to echo through the forest. The smell hit them first, not decomposition or mold as they might have expected, but something antiseptic. like old hospitals or science labs. Stale air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of paper, metal, and something else Marcus couldn't immediately identify. Linda pulled out her phone's flashlight, illuminating the container's interior. Oh my God. The space was meticulously organized, lined with metal shelving and filing cabinets. Cardboard boxes were stacked with military precision, each labeled with dates, numbers, and codes. But it was the walls that made them all take a step back, covered floor to ceiling with photographs, documents, and what appeared to be detailed charts and timelines. "Is this some kind of research station?" Tyler asked, his voice dropping to a whisper despite the isolation. Marcus stepped inside carefully, his legal training making him conscious of potential evidence contamination. The photographs were the most immediately striking element, dozens of them, showing children of various ages. School portraits, candid shots, what looked like medical or psychological evaluation pictures. All appeared to be from the 1980s based on the clothing and photo quality. "Marcus," Linda's voice was tight with concern. "Look at these documents." She was examining a thick folder labeled Phase 3 Behavioral Modification Cognitive Development Study. The letterhead read Hillcrest Research Institute, with an address in nearby Gatlinburg. "I've never heard of this place," Linda said, her teacher's instincts making her naturally suspicious of any organization claiming to study child development. Marcus moved to another section of the wall, where a large map of eastern Tennessee was covered with colored pins and connecting strings, like something from a detective movie. Names were written beside many of the pins, children's names, he realized, with dates and notations. Subject 23, Tommy Hendricks, born 1974, initiated 1982, status relocated, he read from one notation. Subject 31, Lisa Chen, born 1973, initiated 1983, status discontinued. "Dad, what does discontinued mean?" Zoe asked quietly. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. "I'm not sure, honey, but I don't think it's anything good." Tyler had moved to one of the filing cabinets and was rifling through folders. "These are all kids from around here. Look, addresses in Gatlinburg, Sevierville, even some from Nashville. And they're all..." He paused, calculating. "They're all from poor families. Look at these addresses. They're all from the worst parts of town." Linda was examining a different set of documents, her face growing paler by the minute. "These are psychological evaluation reports, detailed profiles of family dynamics, economic status, social isolation factors. It's like they were specifically targeting vulnerable children." The container suddenly felt claustrophobic, despite its size. Marcus's lawyer instincts were screaming warnings, but his paternal instincts were louder. These weren't just documents. They were evidence of something that had happened to real children, kids not much different from Tyler and Zoe. "We need to document everything before we disturb anything else," he said, pulling out his phone. "Linda, start taking pictures of those evaluation reports. Tyler, Zoe, don't touch anything more, but help me identify what we're looking at here." As they worked, a clearer picture began to emerge. The Hillcrest Research Institute appeared to have been conducting long-term psychological experiments on children from disadvantaged backgrounds throughout the 1980s. The studies involved removing children from their families under various pretexts: foster care, educational opportunities, medical treatment, and subjecting them to what the documents euphemistically called environmental conditioning. "Listen to this," Linda said, reading from a thick report. "Subject demonstrates expected response to isolation protocols. Recommendation: advance to Phase 2, trust displacement exercises." This is describing torture, Marcus. Psychological torture of children. The most disturbing discovery was a ledger Tyler found in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet. It listed not just the children's names and outcomes, but also financial records, payments to and from various organizations, government contracts, and what appeared to be placement fees for children who had completed the program. "Placement fees?" Zoe asked when Tyler read the term aloud. Marcus felt his legal training crystallizing around the evidence before them. It looks like they were selling the children. After they'd modified them somehow, they were placing them with new families, or organizations, or... He couldn't finish the thought. As they continued documenting, one name on the placement ledger made Marcus stop cold. Dr. William Pemberton. Placement fee, $75,000. Subject 47, Rebecca Martinez. Status, private adoption. Pemberton, Linda repeated. Isn't that the name of the company you're suing? Marcus nodded slowly, his mind racing. Pemberton Development Corporation. The CEO is William Pemberton Jr. His father would have been, he calculated quickly. Dr. William Pemberton would have been the right age to be involved in something like this in the 1980s. The implications were staggering. Marcus's current legal case suddenly seemed connected to something far darker and more complex than wrongful termination. But before he could process this fully, Tyler's voice cut through his thoughts. Dad, you need to see this. Tyler was standing at the back of the container, holding a folder that had been separate from the others. The tab read, Current Operations, 2015, Present. The folder contained recent photographs, printed emails, and what appeared to be surveillance reports. The photos showed adults, people in their 30s and 40s, but in the margins, someone had written names and numbers that corresponded to the children from the 1980s experiments. These are the same kids, Tyler said, his voice barely audible. Grown up. Linda moved to look over his shoulder. And look at what they became. She pointed to captions under several photos. Nashville District Attorney, State Senator, Federal Judge, CEO of Morrison Industries. Marcus felt the world tilting beneath his feet. The children who had survived the Hillcrest Research Institute's experiments had grown up to become some of Tennessee's most powerful political and business leaders. And according to the dates on the surveillance reports, someone had been watching them and controlling them ever since. A manila envelope at the bottom of the folder contained the most recent materials, dated just 3 months ago. Inside were photographs of Marcus himself, leaving his office, with Linda and the kids, arguing a case in court. There were similar recent photos of several other people, all marked with notes like potential threat level, medium, and recommended action, monitor. At the bottom of the envelope was a single sheet of paper, with a handwritten note. The Blackwood family is becoming problematic. Marcus's investigation into PDC is approaching sensitive areas. Recommend immediate containment protocols. Children appear suitable for recruitment if parents prove non-compliant. Agent Morrison. The forest around them seemed to grow quieter as the implications sank in. They hadn't just stumbled onto evidence of decades-old crimes. They had discovered an ongoing operation, and somehow Marcus's legal work had put his family directly in its crosshairs. Dad, Zoe whispered, what does containment protocols mean? Marcus was about to answer when they heard it, the distant but unmistakable sound of vehicles approaching through the forest. Multiple engines, moving with purpose despite the lack of roads. Linda grabbed his arm. Marcus, we need to leave, now. But as they moved toward the container door, Marcus realized they had a choice that would define everything that came next. They could run, abandoning the evidence and hoping to stay ahead of whoever was coming, or they could take the documents, making themselves targets but ensuring the truth had a chance to survive. The sound of engines was growing closer, and voices could now be heard calling to each other through the trees. Marcus looked at his family, his wife, his children, the people he would do anything to protect. Then he looked at the walls covered with photographs of other people's children, kids who hadn't had anyone to protect them. Tyler, grab that ledger. Linda, take all the recent surveillance files. Zoe, get the folder with the placement records. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking as he reached for the original research documents. Are we really going to steal this stuff, Dad? Tyler asked. Marcus paused at the container door, arms full of evidence that could destroy some of Tennessee's most powerful people or get his family killed. We're not stealing it, son. We're rescuing it. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, and Marcus thought he could make out the distinctive whine of ATVs navigating rough terrain. Whoever was coming knew exactly where they were going. As they stepped out of the container, Marcus caught sight of movement in the trees below. At least 3 all-terrain vehicles making their way up the mountain, still several hundred yards away, but closing fast. This way, he whispered, leading his family deeper into the forest, away from both the container and the trail they had originally planned to follow. But as they crashed through the underbrush, weighted down with stolen documents and the terrible knowledge of what they contained, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that running was exactly what someone had expected them to do. Behind them, the sound of engines stopped, replaced by voices and the slamming of vehicle doors. They had maybe a 10-minute head start, but Marcus realized with growing dread that the people pursuing them had advantages he was only beginning to understand. After all, They had been watching his family for months. They knew exactly who the Blackwoods were, where they were staying, and, most terrifying of all, they knew that Marcus and Linda had 2 children who might be suitable for recruitment if their parents proved non-compliant. As they fled through the Tennessee mountains, the morning sun casting long shadows through the trees, Marcus Blackwood understood that their family vacation had just become something far more dangerous. A fight, not just for justice, but for their very survival. The sound of Marcus's ragged breathing seemed impossibly loud in the pre-dawn forest as he led his family through dense undergrowth, away from the container and the approaching vehicles. Behind them, voices carried through the mountain air, professional, coordinated, closing in. "Dad, I can't keep up," Zoe whispered, her 14-year-old legs struggling with the pace in the steep terrain. Marcus stopped behind a cluster of large boulders, motioning for everyone to crouch low. His lawyer's mind was racing, trying to process what they had discovered while simultaneously calculating their immediate survival options. The documents in his backpack felt like they weighed 100 pounds, each folder a potential death sentence for his family. "Tyler," he whispered, "give me your phone." "What? Why?" "Just do it. Now." Tyler handed over his smartphone with obvious reluctance. Marcus quickly powered it down and removed the battery. "Linda, yours too. Zoe's as well." Linda's teacher instincts immediately grasped the implication. "They're tracking us." The surveillance photos were too detailed, too recent. They knew exactly where we'd be. Marcus pocketed all the phones. "From now on, we assume they can find us through any electronic device." The voices behind them were getting closer, and Marcus could now make out individual words. "North quadrant clear. Check the container again. They can't have gone far with the kids." That last phrase sent ice through Marcus's veins. These people knew about Tyler and Zoe. They had planned for a family, not just him and Linda. "There's an old mining road about half a mile east," Marcus whispered, his childhood memories of these mountains suddenly invaluable. "It connects to the main highway near Miller's Creek, if we can reach it without being seen." They moved carefully through the forest, Marcus leading with Linda bringing up the rear, both parents keeping Tyler and Zoe between them. The stolen documents rustled softly in their backpacks with each step, a constant reminder of what was at stake. 20 minutes of careful navigation brought them to the abandoned mining road, little more than 2 tire ruts overgrown with weeds, but it would take them downhill and away from their pursuers. As they paused to catch their breath, Linda opened one of the folders they had taken. "Marcus, look at this." She showed him a document labeled Asset Placement and Long-Term Monitoring Protocol. Even skimming quickly, the content was chilling. The Hillcrest Research Institute hadn't just experimented on disadvantaged children. They had created a systematic program for placing the successful subjects into positions where they could be monitored and controlled throughout their adult lives. Foster families were selected based on their connections to legal, political, and business networks. Linda read quietly. Educational opportunities were provided to ensure subjects achieved positions of influence. Long-term handlers were assigned to each asset for ongoing behavioral modification and directive implementation. Tyler, reading over his mother's shoulder, pointed to a chart. "Look at the success rate. Out of 67 children in the program, 43 achieved optimal placement in target sectors." Marcus felt his stomach turn as the implications became clear. They weren't just experimenting on these kids. They were creating a network of controlled adults in positions of power. But controlled by whom? Zoe asked. Before anyone could answer, the sound of an ATV engine echoed through the valley below them. Then another, and another. "They're spreading out to cut off escape routes," Marcus realized. His military client work had taught him enough about tactical operations to recognize a coordinated search pattern. Linda was still examining the documents. "There's a phone number here, circled in red, and a note. Emergency contact. Deputy Director Morrison, Federal Child Welfare Agency." "Morrison," Marcus repeated. "That was the name on the surveillance note about us. Agent Morrison." "Dad, is Morrison one of the kids from the experiments?" Tyler asked. Marcus checked the original subject list. Subject 31, Michael Morrison, born 1972. Status, federal placement. He looked up at his family. He's not just working for them. He is one of them. The revelation hit them all simultaneously. The people hunting them weren't just protecting an old conspiracy. They were the conspiracy. The children who had survived the Hillcrest experiments had grown up to run the very systems meant to protect other children. A new sound made them all freeze, helicopter rotors in the distance, but approaching fast. We need to move. Now. Marcus shouldered his backpack, but Linda caught his arm. Marcus, we can't outrun helicopters and ATVs. We need help. Who can we trust? Anyone in law enforcement could be part of this network. Linda's teacher instincts kicked in. What about media? Investigative reporters? With what proof? Documents we stole from an abandoned container? They'd destroy our credibility before we could get the story out. Tyler, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. What about the families? The families of the kids who were taken? Marcus looked at his son with new respect. The parents would know their children had been taken, even if the official story was different. And they'd want justice, Linda added, understanding immediately. Marcus pulled out the subject list, scanning for local names and addresses. Many were from the immediate area. Gatlinburg, Sevierville, small mountain communities where families would have long memories and strong ties. Rebecca Martinez, he read. Subject 47, born 1975, taken in 1983. Parents listed as Carlos and Maria Martinez, Gatlinburg. He looked up. If she was placed with the Pembertons for $75,000, her real parents might still be alive. They'd be in their 70s now. The helicopter sound was getting closer, and they could see searchlights beginning to sweep the forest canopy. How do we find them without phones or internet? Zoe asked. Linda smiled grimly. The old-fashioned way. Public library, phone books, local records. They resumed moving down the mining road, but with a new sense of purpose. They weren't just fleeing anymore. They were hunting for allies. The town of Miller's Creek appeared below them as the sun fully rose, a small mountain community that looked like it hadn't changed much since the 1980s. Perfect for finding people who remembered things that others wanted forgotten. As they approached the outskirts of town, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible 12 hours earlier. He led his family to a small gas station, where a payphone, an actual functioning payphone, sat near the restrooms. Linda, take the kids inside. Buy supplies, water, snacks, local phone book if they have one. Pay cash. What are you going to do? Something that might get us killed, but it's better than running blind. Marcus fed quarters into the payphone and dialed directory assistance. Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Carlos Martinez. After a moment, I have 2 listings for Carlos Martinez in Gatlinburg. Marcus took both numbers. On the third ring, an elderly woman answered the second number. Hola? Mrs. Martinez? My name is Marcus Blackwood. I'm an attorney, and I believe I have information about your daughter Rebecca. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Marcus thought she had hung up. Then, in heavily accented but clear English, my Rebecca died in 1983. The state said she was in an accident at the facility. Mrs. Martinez, I don't believe she died. I think she was given to another family. I have documents that prove it. Another long silence. Then, where are you? Marcus looked around the gas station, calculating risks. Miller's Creek. But we're being followed by people who don't want this information to come out. Stay where you are. My grandson will come for you. He's a police officer, but... She paused. But he's one of the good ones. His name is Detective Luis Martinez, Sevier County Sheriff's Department. Marcus felt a moment of hope, followed immediately by terror. How could they trust anyone in law enforcement? As if reading his thoughts, Mrs. Martinez continued. He knows about Rebecca. He's been looking for answers his whole life. He became a police officer to find out what really happened to his aunt. 20 minutes later, an unmarked police car pulled into the gas station. A man in his early 30s got out. Latino, medium build, wearing civilian clothes, but moving with the controlled alertness of law enforcement. Marcus approached cautiously, his family staying near the store entrance. Detective Martinez? Call me Luis. You're the lawyer who called my grandmother? Yes. But before we go any further, I need to know, are you part of any federal task forces? Any joint operations with agencies outside the county? Luis studied Marcus carefully. You're scared of federal involvement. That tells me you know more about what happened to my family than most people. He paused. No federal connections. I've been deliberately avoiding them because every time I try to investigate Rebecca's case through official channels, the files disappear. Marcus made a decision based on nothing more than the pain he could see in the young detective's eyes. The same pain he would feel if someone had taken Tyler or Zoe. We found evidence. Physical documents that prove your aunt was sold to a wealthy family for $75,000, along with dozens of other children. Luis went very still. Show me. Marcus pulled out the placement ledger, open to Rebecca Martinez's entry. Luis stared at it for a long moment, his hands shaking slightly. Dr. William Pemberton, he read. Is this related to the development company? His son runs Pemberton Development Corporation now. I've been investigating them for a wrongful termination case, but it looks like I've stumbled into something much bigger. Luis looked around the gas station, his police training making him check for threats. My grandmother was right to send me. You're in immediate danger. Federal agents have been asking questions around Gatlinburg since yesterday, showing photos of your family. Federal agents? Child Welfare Services, they said. Looking for a family that had inappropriately removed materials from a federal investigation site. The cover story was smooth, Marcus realized. If they were caught, it would look like they had interfered with an ongoing federal investigation. Any evidence they provided would be discredited, and they would likely disappear into the system. Detective Luis, we need to get this information to someone who can't be controlled or silenced. I know someone, but it means leaving Tennessee. Tonight, Marcus looked back at his family. Linda was watching them through the store window, Tyler and Zoe beside her, all three of them trying to appear normal while obviously terrified. Who? Investigative reporter in Atlanta, Sarah Chen. She's been working on a story about missing children from the 1980s for 3 years. She's already been asking questions about Hillcrest Research Institute. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah Chen. Was there a Lisa Chen in the subject files? Luis's expression darkened. Sarah's older sister disappeared in 1983. Officially, Lisa Chen died in a car accident while being transported to a special school, but Sarah never believed it. Then Sarah Chen is hunting the same people who are hunting us. Exactly. And she has resources, protection, and most importantly, she can't be bought or threatened because she's already lost everything that mattered to her. Marcus was about to respond when Luis's police radio crackled to life. All units, be on the lookout for a family of 4, considered armed and dangerous, wanted in connection with the theft of federal evidence. Subjects should not be approached without backup. Luis immediately turned off the radio. That's your description. They're using official channels now, which means we can't trust anyone in uniform, Marcus said. No, but it also means they're getting desperate. They wouldn't risk exposure through official channels unless they were running out of options. Marcus made another life-changing decision. Get us to Atlanta, tonight. It's going to mean leaving your car, your belongings, everything that can be traced. Marcus looked at his family again. His wife, his children, the people he loved more than his own life. Then he looked at the documents in his backpack, evidence of crimes that had destroyed dozens of families and created a network of controlled adults in positions of power. Detective Martinez. Luis, there's something else you need to know. The children who survived the program, they're adults now, and they're in control of major institutions. Law enforcement, judiciary, political offices, corporate leadership. How do you know? Because they've been watching us. They know about my legal case. They have surveillance photos of my family, and they specifically noted that my children might be suitable for recruitment. Luis's face went pale. They're still taking children. I think so. And I think anyone who gets too close to the truth becomes a target for either elimination or recruitment. As if summoned by their conversation, the distant sound of helicopters became audible again, this time accompanied by multiple vehicle engines approaching from different directions. Time's up, Luis said. My truck is around back. Leave everything except the documents and let's go. Now. As they collected Linda, Tyler, and Zoe and headed for Luis's vehicle, Marcus caught sight of black SUVs entering the gas station from both ends of the main road. Professional, coordinated, with the kind of resources that suggested federal backing. But as they climbed into Luis's pickup truck and pulled out through a back access road, Marcus realized something that chilled him more than the pursuit itself. The timing was too perfect. The federal agents had arrived exactly when Marcus had made contact with local law enforcement, which meant either Luis was compromised or... Luis? Marcus said carefully. How did your grandmother know to trust me? How did she know you'd be able to help? Luis met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Because 3 days ago, she got a phone call. A woman who said she was Rebecca, my Aunt Rebecca, grown up, warning her that people asking about the family would be in danger. and that she should help them if she could. The truck went silent, except for the engine noise. "Your aunt is alive," Linda said quietly. "And she's been watching us too," Marcus realized. "The question is she trying to help us, or is this all part of a trap we're walking into?" As they drove through the Tennessee mountains toward Atlanta, that question hung over them like a storm cloud. Because in a conspiracy this deep, this carefully constructed, the difference between salvation and destruction might come down to which side had gotten to them first. Behind them, the lights of pursuit vehicles appeared and disappeared among the mountain curves, never quite catching up, but never quite falling behind either. And somewhere ahead of them, in Atlanta, waited a reporter who might be their last hope, or another asset in a network of control that had been 40 years in the making. The Atlanta skyline pierced the pre-dawn darkness like broken glass as Luis's pickup truck wound through empty interstate highways. Marcus had been checking the side mirrors obsessively for the past 2 hours, but their pursuers seemed to have fallen back once they crossed the Georgia state line. "Why did they stop following us?" Tyler asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Luis adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. "Either they're setting up something bigger ahead of us, or they don't want to operate outside their territory. Or," Linda said quietly, "they know exactly where we're going, and they're already there." The thought had been gnawing at Marcus since they'd left Tennessee. The timing of everything felt too convenient. Rebecca's warning call, Luis appearing exactly when they needed help, even the pursuers backing off at the state line. In his legal career, when things felt too convenient, it usually meant someone was being manipulated. Sarah Chen's address led them to a converted warehouse in Atlanta's old Fourth Ward, the kind of building that housed artists, startups, and people who needed to work outside traditional structures. Luis parked 3 blocks away, and they approached on foot as the sun began to rise. "Something's wrong," Marcus said as they neared the building. The street was too quiet, even for early morning. No delivery trucks, no early commuters, no joggers despite being in a trendy neighborhood. Luis had his hand near his concealed weapon. "The building's too dark. For a working journalist, there should be lights on somewhere." They found Sarah Chen's unit on the 3rd floor. The door was ajar. Luis drew his pistol and motioned for the family to stay back. He pushed the door open with his foot, weapon ready. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. The loft space had been completely ransacked, computer equipment destroyed, files scattered everywhere, furniture overturned. But it wasn't random destruction. It was systematic, professional. Someone had been looking for specific information, and they had found Sarah Chen. She was tied to a chair in the center of the room, unconscious but breathing. Asian American, early 30s, with short black hair and clothes that suggested she'd been taken by surprise. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. "Is she?" Zoe started to ask. "She's alive," Luis confirmed, checking her pulse. He began untying her restraints. "But this is a trap. We need to leave. Now." "Wait," Marcus said, studying the scene. "Look at the destruction pattern. They wanted it to look like a break-in, but they were careful not to damage certain things." He pointed to a wall where photographs were still carefully arranged. Dozens of pictures of children, all apparently from the 1980s. And in the center, a photo of a young Asian girl who looked remarkably like Sarah. "Lisa Chen," Linda breathed. Her sister. But it was what Marcus saw next that made his blood freeze. Pinned to a corkboard next to Lisa's photo was a current surveillance picture of his own family, taken outside their Nashville home just a week ago. And beside it, a handwritten note. "The Blackwoods have served their purpose. Proceed to Phase 2. We didn't stumble onto anything," Marcus realized with growing horror. "We were led here. All of it. Finding the container, the documents, even meeting Luis. It was all planned." Sarah Chen's eyes fluttered open. When she saw them, instead of relief, her expression showed pure terror. "You have to run," she whispered hoarsely. "It's not what you think. Rebecca Martinez. She's not trying to help you. She's the one in charge." Luis stepped back as if he'd been slapped. "That's impossible. Rebecca was a victim. She was 8 years old when they took her." "She was 8 when they recruited her," Sarah corrected, struggling to sit up despite her injuries. The Hillcrest Institute didn't just experiment on random children. They specifically selected kids with certain psychological profiles, high intelligence, specific trauma backgrounds, particular genetic markers that made them susceptible to long-term conditioning. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The successful subjects weren't placed randomly. They were strategically positioned to create a network. A network controlled by the ones who adapted best to the conditioning, Sarah confirmed. Rebecca Martinez wasn't sold to the Pembertons. She became Rebecca Pemberton. She's been running the entire operation since the 1990s. The revelation hit Luis like a physical blow. My aunt is the one who's been taking children for 40 years? Not just taking them, evolving the program, making it more sophisticated, more integrated into legitimate systems. Sarah struggled to her feet, wincing. The modern version doesn't require abduction. They identify target families, create situations that force parents to give up children voluntarily, false criminal charges, manufactured child welfare cases, economic pressure that forces families to surrender custody. Tyler's voice was barely audible. That's why they were watching us. Dad's legal case against Pemberton Development wasn't a threat to their business. It was a test. To see how we'd react under pressure, Linda added, understanding flooding her face. To see if we were suitable for recruitment, or if our children were. Marcus pulled out the surveillance file they'd taken from the container. With this new understanding, the notations made terrible sense. Potential threat level, medium, wasn't about his legal case. It was about his family's psychological profile. Recommended action, monitor, meant they were being evaluated for the program. How long have they been planning this? He asked Sarah. The Blackwood family has been under observation for 18 months, she replied. Ever since Tyler scored in the 99th percentile on state testing and Zoe showed exceptional performance in competitive swimming. High-achieving children from upper-middle-class families are the current preferred targets. Why? Zoe asked, her 14-year-old mind trying to process the enormity of what she was learning. Because the program has evolved, Sarah explained. They don't need broken, desperate children anymore. They need kids who are already high achievers, who can be guided into even higher levels of success and power. The trauma-based conditioning of the 1980s was crude compared to what they can do now with willing families. Luis was staring at a wall covered with Sarah's research. How do you know all this? Because I've been hunting them for 3 years. Ever since I found Lisa. Found her? She's alive? Sarah nodded grimly. Dr. Lisa Chen, Chief of Pediatric Psychology at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, one of the most respected child psychologists in the Southeast, and completely loyal to the network that created her. The room went silent as the implications sank in. Sarah's own sister, the victim she'd been trying to save, had become part of the system that had taken her. Lisa's the one who identified your family as suitable candidates, Sarah continued. She's been tracking high-achieving children throughout the Southeast for years, creating psychological profiles that feed into the selection algorithm. Marcus felt the last pieces of his old reality crumbling. Then coming here, bringing our children here, delivers them directly to one of the program's primary recruitment centers. Yes, as if summoned by their conversation, the sound of footsteps echoed in the stairwell outside. Multiple people, moving with practiced quiet. Back exit, Luis whispered, but Sarah shook her head. They'll have surrounded the building. Standard protocol. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Then, a woman's voice, speaking with the slight accent Marcus had heard on the phone with Luis's grandmother. Mr. Blackwood, my name is Rebecca Pemberton. I think it's time we talked. She entered the room alone, and Marcus's first thought was how utterly normal she looked. Mid-40s, professionally dressed, the kind of woman he might have sat next to at a PTA meeting, but her eyes held something that made his skin crawl. The same calculating emptiness he'd seen in certain judges and opposing counsel, who seemed to view other people as game pieces, rather than human beings. You've caused quite a stir, Marcus. May I call you Marcus? She didn't wait for an answer. Breaking into federal property, stealing classified documents, kidnapping a police officer. We didn't kidnap anyone. Luis started to protest, but Rebecca held up a hand. Detective Martinez, you've been very helpful. Your emotional investment in finding your lost aunt made you the perfect person to bring the Blackwood family exactly where we needed them. Luis's face went white. You used me. We created you, Rebecca corrected gently. Do you really think your career path was accidental? Police Academy scholarship, perfect performance reviews, assignment to exactly the cases that would keep you searching for me? You've been guided every step of the way. Marcus stepped protectively in front of his children. What do you want? The same thing we've always wanted. To create a better world by placing the right people in positions of power. Your children have exceptional potential, Marcus. Tyler's analytical abilities, Zoe's competitive drive and social intelligence, they could achieve remarkable things with proper guidance. You mean proper conditioning? Rebecca's smile was genuinely warm, which made it infinitely more disturbing. The old methods were so crude. Physical isolation, psychological trauma, behavioral modification through pain. We've learned so much since then. She gestured around the ransacked room. Modern techniques are far more elegant. Elite private schools with carefully selected curricula. Summer programs that build leadership skills while subtly shaping worldview. Mentorship opportunities that provide positive reinforcement for desired behaviors. You're talking about brainwashing, Linda said. I'm talking about education, Rebecca replied. Every parent wants their child to succeed. We simply ensure that success happens in directions that benefit society as a whole. Benefit your society, Marcus corrected. Yes, a society run by intelligent, capable, properly motivated individuals, rather than the chaos of democracy and market forces. Rebecca's tone remained conversational, as if discussing weekend plans. Look around you, Marcus. Look at the world your generation has created. Climate change, political polarization, economic inequality, social media manipulation. Is this really the legacy you want to leave your children? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Because part of what she was saying made sense. The world was broken in so many ways, and the traditional systems seemed incapable of fixing it. You see it, don't you? Rebecca continued. The appeal of competent leadership, of having important decisions made by people who actually understand the consequences. Made by people you control, Sarah interjected. Made by people who share a common understanding of what needs to be done. Rebecca turned to Sarah with something like pity. Your sister Lisa is one of our greatest success stories, Sarah. She saved hundreds of children from genuinely abusive situations, identified and nurtured exceptional talents, and helped build systems that actually protect vulnerable populations. Would you really want to destroy that? The question hung in the air like poison gas, because Sarah's 3-year investigation had undoubtedly uncovered the good things the network had accomplished alongside the terrible ones. Tyler, who had been silent throughout the conversation, suddenly spoke up. What happens to the kids who don't make the cut? The ones who aren't exceptional enough? Rebecca looked at him with something approaching approval. An excellent question, Tyler. It shows exactly the kind of strategic thinking we value. She paused, as if considering how much to reveal. Some children require more intensive intervention to reach their potential. Others, unfortunately, prove unsuitable for advancement despite our best efforts. What does unsuitable mean? Zoe pressed. It means they disappear, Sarah answered when Rebecca remained silent. Just like in the 1980s. The difference is that now they disappear into legitimate systems. Foster care, juvenile detention, psychiatric facilities, places where no one looks for them anymore. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, hot and clean and clarifying. You're still torturing children. You've just gotten better at hiding it. We're still saving children, Rebecca corrected. From poverty, from abuse, from lives of mediocrity and wasted potential. The methods have evolved, but the mission remains the same. She moved closer to Tyler and Zoe, and every parental instinct Marcus possessed screamed warnings. Your children could be part of something unprecedented, Marcus. The first generation raised specifically to solve the problems previous generations created. Climate change, technological displacement, resource scarcity. These challenges require leaders who were prepared for them from childhood. Leaders who think exactly like you, Linda said. Leaders who think clearly, Rebecca replied. Without the emotional and cultural baggage that prevents effective action. Marcus realized with crystal clarity that they were at the crucial moment. Rebecca wasn't threatening them. She was recruiting them. The entire elaborate chase, the documents, even this conversation, had been designed to bring them to this point where her offer might actually seem reasonable. And the most terrifying part was that it almost did. You have until tomorrow evening to decide, Rebecca continued. Tyler and Zoe would attend a special summer program starting next week, just 2 months, to see how they adapt to enhanced educational opportunities. If they thrive, and I believe they will, then we can discuss longer-term arrangements. And if we refuse? Marcus asked. Rebecca's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Then you'll return to your normal lives, and we'll find other families who are more open to opportunity. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like they could just walk away. But Marcus caught the subtle emphasis on, you'll return, and he understood the real message. His family might return to their normal lives, but other families wouldn't get that choice. And somewhere, other parents were facing this same impossible decision. I need to think about it, he said carefully. Rebecca smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine rather than calculated. Of course. It's an important decision. Sarah can provide you with contact information when you're ready. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Marcus, the documents you took from the container? We appreciate you keeping them safe. They'll be valuable additions to our historical archive. After she left, the room felt simultaneously empty and suffocated. Louise broke the silence first. She's right about one thing. The system is broken. That doesn't justify what they're doing, Linda said firmly. Doesn't it? Tyler's question shocked them all. I mean, look at climate change. Look at politics. Maybe competent leadership is worth other costs. Marcus stared at his 16-year-old son and realized that Rebecca's recruitment pitch had been more effective than he'd thought. In less than 20 minutes, she had planted seeds of doubt about everything they believed about freedom, choice, and the value of individual autonomy. Tyler, he said carefully, do you really want to live in a world where a small group of people decides what's best for everyone else? I want to live in a world that isn't falling apart, Tyler replied. And maybe I could be part of fixing it. Sarah looked at the family with deep sadness. This is how it starts. They make you complicit by making you choose. And once you choose them, even for what seem like good reasons, they own you forever. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Marcus realized that their real fight wasn't against pursuit or capture anymore. It was against seduction, the terrible appeal of surrendering difficult choices to people who promised to make them correctly. And looking at his son's thoughtful expression, Marcus understood that Rebecca Pemberton had already achieved her most important victory. She had made her offer sound reasonable. The safe house Sarah led them to was a cramped apartment above a Korean restaurant in Atlanta's Buford Highway district, the kind of place where people minded their own business, and cash was the only currency that mattered. As they settled into the small living room, the weight of Rebecca's ultimatum hung over them like storm clouds. Tyler hadn't spoken since leaving the warehouse, but Marcus could see his son's mind working, processing Rebecca's offer with the same analytical intensity he brought to everything else. It terrified Marcus more than any physical threat they'd faced. 24 hours, Linda said, checking her watch. That's all we have to figure this out. Sarah was at a laptop she'd retrieved from a hidden location, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I've been tracking their recruitment patterns for 3 years. You're not the first family to face this choice, and you won't be the last. What happened to the others? Zoe asked quietly. Sarah's typing slowed. Mixed results. About 60% accept some version of the offer. Their children enter the program, and within 5 years, the entire family structure has been optimized. Optimized how? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Parents get better jobs, often in positions where they can facilitate the network's goals. Children excel academically and socially, but their personalities gradually shift. They become more compliant, more focused on achievement, less questioning of authority. Tyler looked up for the first time in an hour. That doesn't sound entirely bad. The room went silent. Marcus felt his heart breaking as he watched his son seriously consider surrendering his autonomy for the promise of guaranteed success. Tyler, Linda said carefully, success without choice isn't really success. It's performance. But it's performance that makes the world better, Tyler replied. Look at what we're facing. Climate change, political dysfunction, economic inequality. Maybe individual freedom is a luxury we can't afford anymore. Louise, who had been brooding in the corner, suddenly stood up. You want to know what that looks like? I'll show you. He pulled out his phone and showed them a photo of a young man in military dress uniform. This is my cousin David. He was recruited by the program in 2010 when he was 15. Brilliant kid, great athlete, perfect candidate. Marcus studied the photo. The young man looked confident, accomplished. Everything parents wanted their children to become. David's now a major in Army intelligence. Louise continued. He's stationed at the Pentagon, has access to classified information, and by all external measures, he's incredibly successful. Then what's the problem? Tyler asked. Luis scrolled to another photo. The same young man, but taken recently. The confidence was still there, but something else had changed. The eyes looked different, flatter. Last Christmas, David came to visit. He spent 2 hours explaining to my grandmother, his own abuela, why her Medicare benefits were economically inefficient and should be reduced. Not because he was cruel, but because he genuinely believed it was the optimal policy choice. Luis put the phone away. They don't break you, Tyler. They perfect you. They remove all the messy human emotions that make people do irrational things like caring more about their family than abstract efficiency. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Maybe that's not entirely wrong either. Maybe caring too much about our own families is why we can't solve bigger problems. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. In less than 24 hours, Rebecca had gotten further into his son's head than Marcus had thought possible. Sarah looked up from her laptop. Tyler, can I show you something? She pulled up a video file security footage from what appeared to be a high school. This is from a recruitment demonstration I filmed last year. The subject is a 17-year-old named Kevin Walsh. The video showed a normal-looking teenager in a classroom setting, participating in what appeared to be a group discussion about environmental policy. He was articulate, passionate, clearly intelligent. Kevin was recruited 2 years ago. His parents were told he was attending a special environmental leadership program. Sarah clicked to another video, dated 6 months later. The same classroom, the same boy, but everything had changed. Kevin's posture was different, more controlled. His speech patterns were more formal, and when he discussed environmental policy now, it was with a cold precision that made Marcus's skin crawl. Watch his eyes when other students disagree with him, Sarah instructed. On screen, another student challenged Kevin's position on carbon pricing. Kevin's response was perfect, logical, comprehensive, devastating, but his expression never changed. He looked at the disagreeing student with the same detached interest a scientist might show when observing an interesting but ultimately irrelevant insect. They don't torture the empathy out of them anymore, Sarah explained. They simply redirect it. Kevin cares deeply about the environment and human welfare, but he cares about it in the abstract, as a systems optimization problem. Individual humans are just variables in the equation. Tyler was staring at the screen with an expression Marcus couldn't read. What happened to him? Kevin's now studying at MIT on a full scholarship. He'll graduate at 19 with degrees in environmental engineering and public policy. By 25, he'll likely be advising government agencies on climate response strategies. Sarah paused the video. He'll probably save millions of lives through his work on carbon capture technology. Then the program worked, Tyler said quietly. Did it? Sarah clicked to a final video. Kevin at home with his family during a holiday gathering. The transformation was heartbreaking. Kevin interacted with his parents and younger siblings with the same polite detachment he'd shown the disagreeing student. When his little sister asked him to play a board game, he explained why board games were an inefficient use of time and suggested she engage in skill-building activities instead. His family loves him, Sarah said softly. But they've lost him. The boy who used to build blanket forts with his sister and stay up all night talking with his parents about everything and nothing. That boy is gone. Marcus watched his son's face as he processed the video. For a moment, Tyler's analytical mask slipped, and Marcus saw genuine emotion, loss, fear, recognition of what he might be trading away. But then Tyler's expression hardened again. Maybe that's the price of fixing the world. Tyler, Marcus's voice was sharper than he intended. Listen to yourself. You're talking about voluntarily lobotomizing your own emotions. I'm talking about growing up, Tyler shot back. About stop being selfish and start thinking about something bigger than my own comfort. The argument that followed was the worst fight Marcus had ever had with his son. Tyler accused his parents of being part of the problem, of prioritizing their emotional attachment to him over his potential to make a real difference. Marcus and Linda tried to explain why individual autonomy and human connection mattered more than abstract optimization. But with every word, Marcus could see Tyler pulling further away, seduced by the promise of purpose and meaning that Rebecca had dangled in front of him. It was Zoe who finally ended the argument. Stop, she said quietly, but with enough force that everyone turned to look at her. Just stop. She was staring at Sarah's laptop screen. where the final image of Kevin Walsh remained frozen. A brilliant young man who had traded his humanity for the promise of saving the world. "I don't want to save the world if it means I can't love people anymore," Zoe said simply. "What's the point of fixing everything if we stop caring about anyone?" The profound simplicity of her statement hit the room like a physical force. Tyler looked at his sister, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in days, and Marcus saw something shift in his son's eyes. "You're right," Tyler said quietly. "I was scared. About climate change, about the future, about whether I'll be able to make any difference at all. And Rebecca made it sound like I could stop being scared if I just stopped being me." Marcus felt a wave of relief so intense it made him dizzy. But before he could respond, Sarah's laptop chimed with an incoming message. "Marcus," she said, her voice strange, "you need to see this." The message was from Rebecca Pemberton, but it wasn't addressed to the family. It was addressed to Sarah, and it was clearly part of an ongoing conversation. Phase 4 complete. Subject response within expected parameters. Recommend proceeding to final revelation as discussed. RP. Sarah's reply, sent just minutes before. Understood. Will initiate Protocol 7 now. Subject should be fully prepared for integration. SC. The room went dead silent as the implications sank in. "Sarah," Marcus said slowly, "what is Protocol 7? Sarah closed the laptop and turned to face them, and Marcus saw that her expression had changed completely. The desperate, hunted look was gone, replaced by something calm and professional. "Protocol 7 is the final phase of recruitment," she said matter-of-factly. "The point where subjects are given the complete truth and offered genuine choice based on full information." Marcus felt reality shifting around him again. "You're working with them. I'm working for them. I have been since they recruited me 6 years ago." Sarah's voice held no apology. "My entire investigation, my obsession with finding Lisa, my hatred of the network, all of it was designed to make me a credible ally when you needed one." Luis had gone very still. "The 3 years you said you'd been hunting them. I've been hunting families like yours, identifying those who might be suitable for recruitment, developing psychological profiles, creating the crisis scenarios that lead to decision points like this one." Marcus stared at this woman who had seemed like their salvation just hours before. The ransacked apartment, your injuries, theater. Very effective theater, designed to make you trust me and to demonstrate the stakes involved. Tyler's voice was barely audible. "Everything you showed us about Kevin Walsh was completely real. Kevin is one of our most successful recent integrations. But I didn't show you those videos to warn you away from the program, Tyler. I showed them to demonstrate that the choice you're facing has genuine consequences, and to help you understand exactly what those consequences are." The laptop chimed again. Another message from Rebecca. "Begin final revelation sequence. Subject Alpha requires truth about his own background." Sarah looked directly at Marcus. "Subject Alpha. That's you, Marcus. And there's something about your own history that you need to know before you make your decision." Marcus felt the last foundations of his understanding crumble. "What are you talking about?" Sarah pulled up a new file on her laptop, official-looking documents that made Marcus's blood freeze. Marcus Anthony Blackwood, born March 15, 1982, Nashville, Tennessee. Parents, David and Carol Blackwood. She looked up at him. "Except that's not your real birth certificate." She showed him another document. Marcus Anthony Chen, born March 15, 1982, Knoxville, Tennessee. Parents, Dr. known. James Chen and Dr. Angela Rodriguez Chen. The room started spinning. Marcus reached for Linda's hand, anchoring himself to something real. "My name is Chen," he whispered. Dr. James Chen was one of the original researchers at Hillcrest Research Institute. Dr. Angela Rodriguez Chen was a child psychologist who initially opposed the program. Sarah's voice was gentle now, almost kind. When they tried to expose the research in 1985, they were killed in what was officially ruled a car accident. Marcus couldn't breathe. "And you were 3 years old. Too young for standard integration, but perfect for a long-term sleeper protocol. You were placed with David and Carol Blackwood, a childless couple who had been thoroughly vetted for their stability, values, and ability to raise a child who would naturally develop into someone useful to the network." The implications crashed over Marcus like a tsunami. His entire life, his career, his family, all of it had been guided by invisible hands. Your scholarship to law school, Sarah continued. Your first job at the firm that happened to specialize in cases against certain corporations. Your eventual decision to start your own practice and take on exactly the type of clients who would eventually bring you into conflict with Pemberton Development Corporation. None of it was accidental. Marcus thought about his career, the choices that had seemed so natural, so driven by his own values and interests. The pattern Sarah was describing felt impossible, but it also felt terrifyingly familiar. The Pemberton case itself was designed to bring you to this point, Sarah explained. To create the crisis that would force you to discover the network, bring your children to our attention, and ultimately face the choice that Rebecca offered. Then this is all meaningless, Linda said, her voice hollow. Everything we've done, everything we've learned, it's all been scripted. Not scripted, Sarah corrected. Guided. There's an important difference. Your reactions, your choices, your values, those are genuine. We've simply created the circumstances that would reveal your true character and allow us to make you an offer based on who you really are. Tyler was staring at his father with a mixture of amazement and horror. Dad, you're like me. You're part of their program. I was never integrated, Marcus said desperately. I made my own choices. I chose Linda, chose to have children, chose my career. Yes, Sarah agreed. You did choose all of those things. And every choice you made confirmed that you're exactly the kind of person we need in our network. Ethical, intelligent, driven by genuine desire to help people, but also practical enough to understand that sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for the greater good. She closed the laptop and stood up. Marcus, you weren't recruited as a child like Tyler would be. You were cultivated as an adult, guided into becoming someone who could make the choice we're asking you to make with full understanding of what it means. The room fell silent except for the sound of traffic from the street below. Marcus looked at his family, his wife, his children, the people he loved more than his own life, and realized that nothing about their situation was what it had seemed. They weren't victims stumbling onto a conspiracy. They were the culmination of a 40-year plan, brought to this moment through careful manipulation that had begun before Marcus was old enough to form memories. What's the real choice? He asked finally. Sarah smiled, and for the first time, it looked completely genuine. The choice is exactly what Rebecca told you it was. Tyler and Zoe can join our program and help build a better world, while you and Linda take positions within our network that utilize your skills and experience. Or you can walk away, return to your normal lives, and hope that someone else will solve the problems that are destroying our civilization. And if we walk away, then you go home to Nashville, resume your law practice, and watch the world continue falling apart while knowing you had a chance to help fix it and chose not to. Marcus looked around the room, at Luis, who had been manipulated his entire life, at Tyler, who was still processing the revelation about his father, at Zoe, who had cut through all the complexity with simple moral clarity, at Linda, who was watching him with love and trust, and the expectation that he would find a way to protect their family. There's a third option, he said quietly. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh? We expose everything. The entire network, the recruitment programs, the manipulation, all of it. We burn it all down and let the world make its own messy, inefficient human choices about how to fix itself. Sarah's smile didn't waver. With what evidence? Documents you stole from federal property? Testimony from a family that's been under psychological stress for days? Accusations against some of the most respected people in politics, law enforcement, and business? She had a point. Everything they'd discovered would be discredited, explained away, buried under official investigations that would clear everyone involved. Besides, Sarah continued, even if you could expose us, what then? The climate crisis continues, political dysfunction gets worse, inequality grows, and millions of people suffer because you chose ideological purity over practical solutions. It was the same argument Rebecca had made, dressed up in different words. The promise that surrender would be more effective than resistance. But as Marcus looked at his family, he realized something that Sarah and Rebecca had overlooked in all their careful planning. They had taught him everything he needed to know to destroy them. You're right, he said quietly. We can't expose you through normal channels, but you've made one critical mistake. What's that? Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd felt in days. You told us the truth. All of it. including the fact that your entire network depends on the willing cooperation of people who believe they're making ethical choices. Sarah's expression shifted slightly. Marcus, what happens to your network when people like Kevin Walsh learn that their entire families were targeted and manipulated from childhood? When Dr. Lisa Chen discovers that her sister's investigation was just another recruitment tool? When all your carefully cultivated assets realize they never had any real choice at all? Marcus stood up, feeling strength return to his voice for the first time since this nightmare began. You've built your network on the illusion of ethical choice. But once people understand that the choice was manufactured, that their entire lives were scripted, how long do you think their cooperation will last? The apartment went very quiet. Even the traffic noise from outside seemed to fade. You can't reach them, Sarah said, but Marcus caught the uncertainty in her voice. Can I? You've shown me exactly how your communication systems work, who the key players are, where they're vulnerable. Marcus pulled out the phone he'd taken from the container, Rebecca's direct communication device. And you've given me the one thing I need to make them listen. Proof that they were never the chosen ones. They were just the ones who survived the conditioning. Sarah reached for her laptop, but Luis was faster. In one smooth motion, he grabbed the device and smashed it against the wall. I may have been manipulated my whole life, Luis said, but I'm still a cop, and cops don't like being played. Sarah stared at the broken laptop, then at Marcus, and for the first time since revealing her true identity, she looked genuinely afraid. You're making a mistake, she said. The network has resources you can't imagine. Even if you could reach some of our assets, even if you could convince them to break their conditioning, the leadership will simply adapt, find new recruits, develop new methods. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But in the meantime, how many children won't be taken? How many families won't be destroyed? How many Kevin Walshes might get a chance to remember what it feels like to care about their little sisters? He looked at Tyler and Zoe. Sometimes you don't fight because you think you can win. You fight because it's the right thing to do. Tyler nodded slowly. And sometimes, the messy, inefficient human choice is the only choice worth making. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Marcus realized that Rebecca had been right about one thing. The world was broken, and fixing it would require extraordinary people making difficult choices. She had just been wrong about what those choices needed to be. The abandoned warehouse in Atlanta's industrial district felt like the perfect place for endings. As Marcus led his family through the shadows cast by towering shipping containers, Rebecca's communication device in his hand buzzed with constant incoming messages, a network in crisis, trying to locate their missing assets. Are you sure about this? Linda whispered as they approached the building, where Marcus had arranged to meet Rebecca Pemberton for what he'd told her would be his family's surrender. No, Marcus admitted, but I'm sure about what happens if we do nothing. It had taken 6 hours to set up what he hoped would be the network's downfall. Using Rebecca's own communication device, Marcus had sent carefully crafted messages to every contact in the system, messages that appeared to come from network leadership, requesting immediate status updates and current operational details due to a potential security breach. The responses had been overwhelming. Dozens of high-ranking officials, judges, police commissioners, corporate executives, and government administrators had unwittingly provided Marcus with a complete picture of the network's scope and current activities. More importantly, they had confirmed their locations and direct contact information. Phase 2 is already in motion, Tyler said, checking the burner phone Luis had acquired. Sarah's sister, Dr. Lisa Chen, should be receiving her package right about now. Marcus had crafted Lisa's package with particular care. Along with copies of all the original Hillcrest Institute documents, he had included the surveillance footage Sarah had shown them of Kevin Walsh, plus detailed records of Lisa's own childhood conditioning and the systematic manipulation that had shaped her career. But most importantly, he had included recordings of Sarah's admissions about her role in the network, including her casual description of Lisa as one of our most successful integrations. What if it doesn't work? Zoe asked. What if she just reports it to Rebecca instead of questioning anything? Then we find out how deep the conditioning really goes, Marcus replied. But Lisa Chen became a child psychologist for a reason. Somewhere under all that programming, the part of her that wanted to help children is still there. Luis emerged from his position covering the warehouse's rear entrance. Movement. 3 vehicles approaching from the north. Looks like Rebecca brought backup. Marcus checked his watch. 8:47 p.m. Rebecca expected them to surrender at 9 o'clock, officially accepting the network's offer for Tyler and Zoe. Instead, she was walking into what Marcus hoped would be the beginning of the end for everything she had built. "Remember," he told his family, "once we're inside, everything depends on timing. Luis, you know what to do if this goes wrong? Get your family out and make sure the evidence reaches the media contacts we discussed." Luis checked his weapon one final time. "But Marcus, if Rebecca realizes what you've done, she'll try to kill us." Marcus finished. "I know. But if we run now, other families will face what we've faced. Other children will be taken. Other parents will have to make impossible choices." Tyler, who had been quiet during their preparations, suddenly spoke up. "Dad, what if you're wrong? What if the network really could fix things? Climate change, political dysfunction, inequality, what if they're actually the solution?" It was the question Marcus had been dreading, the one that had kept him awake during their brief rest period. Because part of him, the part that had been shaped and guided since childhood, could see the appeal of Rebecca's vision. "Tyler, do you remember when you were 8 and you wanted to build that treehouse?" Tyler looked confused by the change of subject. "Yeah, but what does that have to do with—" "You had this amazing design. Structurally perfect, efficient use of materials, integrated rain collection system. It would have been the most advanced treehouse in the neighborhood. But you and Mom said it was too complicated for an 8-year-old. We said it was too complicated for an 8-year-old to build alone. So what did we do?" Tyler's expression shifted as he remembered. "You helped me, all of us working together, figuring it out as we went. And what did we end up with? A treehouse that was nothing like my original design. Messier, less efficient, kind of lopsided." Tyler paused, understanding flooding his face. "But it was ours. We built it together, and every weird choice we made had a story behind it. That's the difference between Rebecca's world and ours," Marcus said. "She wants to build the perfect treehouse by controlling every variable. We want to build it together, accepting that it might be messy and imperfect, but knowing that the process of building it together is what makes it valuable." As they approached the warehouse entrance, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Phase 3 successful. Dr. Chen has made contact with subjects 23, 31, and 47. Network experiencing significant asset resistance. Continue operation. JM." Marcus smiled grimly. JM. Had to be someone within the network itself, someone who had received his evidence packages and decided to help rather than report him. The fact that Rebecca's own assets were beginning to turn against her meant the psychological foundation of her control was cracking. "Time to finish this," he said, leading his family into the warehouse. Rebecca was waiting in the center of the vast space, but she wasn't alone. Marcus counted at least 8 people, some in suits, others in tactical gear, all of them moving with the controlled precision of people accustomed to violence. "Marcus," Rebecca called out as they approached. "I have to admit I'm disappointed. When you asked for this meeting, I hoped you had decided to accept our offer." "I have decided," Marcus replied, stopping just outside the circle of Rebecca's people. "But not in the way you expected." Rebecca's expression shifted slightly. Something in Marcus's tone had alerted her that this wasn't going according to script. "I've spent the last 6 hours learning about your network," Marcus continued. "Talking to your assets, sharing information with them about how they were recruited and conditioned. It turns out that even perfectly programmed people have limits to their loyalty." One of Rebecca's assistants whispered something in her ear. Her face went pale. "Dr. Lisa Chen has called an emergency meeting of the Children's Healthcare Ethics Board," Marcus said, watching Rebecca's reaction. "She's questioning the psychological profiles and placement recommendations she's been making for the past 6 years. Subject 23, Tommy Hendricks, now a federal judge, has recused himself from 3 cases this week and is requesting a review of his judicial decisions. And perhaps most importantly, your financial networks are experiencing what I believe accountants call liquidity issues." Rebecca's composure was cracking. "You have no idea what you've done. The stability we've created, the progress we've made on intractable problems, you're destroying decades of work. I'm freeing people to make their own choices," Marcus corrected. "Even bad ones, especially bad ones. And what about the children who will suffer because of those bad choices? What about the climate crisis that won't be solved because political leaders are too concerned with re-election to make hard decisions? What about the wars that will happen because diplomats prioritize national interests over global stability? Rebecca's voice was rising, and Marcus could hear the genuine passion behind her words. She truly believed she was saving the world. "You're right," he said quietly. "Bad things will happen because people have free will. Children will suffer because parents make selfish choices. Politicians will ignore climate change because they're afraid of losing votes. Diplomats will choose nationalism over cooperation." Rebecca looked satisfied, as if Marcus was finally seeing reason. "But good things will happen too," Marcus continued. "Things you could never plan or control. Parents will sacrifice everything for children who aren't even their own. Politicians will risk their careers to do what's right. Ordinary people will find extraordinary solutions to problems that experts said were impossible." He gestured to his family. "You spent 40 years creating the perfect conditions to recruit us. You manipulated my entire life, destroyed my birth parents, shaped my career, even guided me to meet Linda and have children. All so you could bring us to this moment where we would make the choice you wanted. And yet here we are," Tyler added, stepping forward, "choosing differently anyway." Rebecca's mask finally slipped completely. "You're choosing chaos over order, sentiment over logic, failure over success. We're choosing freedom over control," Linda said, "even if it means our children might fail, even if it means the world stays broken, even if it means we die for it," Zoe added, her young voice steady and clear. Rebecca stared at the family for a long moment, and Marcus saw something he hadn't expected in her eyes. Envy. After 40 years of perfect control, of optimized decisions and calculated outcomes, she was looking at a family that was willing to risk everything for something as illogical as love. "You won't be dying for it," she said finally, "because I'm not going to kill you. That would be inefficient." She nodded to her people, and Marcus tensed, ready for violence. But instead of attacking, they began leaving. One by one, Rebecca's supposedly loyal team walked away, heading for the exits without looking back. "It seems your message about manufactured choice was quite persuasive," Rebecca said, watching her support structure crumble. "Even my security team has decided they'd rather make their own decisions about who to work for." Marcus felt a moment of pure amazement. It had actually worked. The network's own people were choosing freedom over security, uncertainty over control. "What happens now?" Luis asked. Rebecca smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuinely peaceful rather than calculated. "Now I find out what it's like to make choices without a 40-year plan. It's terrifying, but..." She paused, looking around the empty warehouse. "It's also the first real decision I've made since I was 8 years old." She walked toward the exit, then stopped. "Marcus, you should know. The choice I made at 8 wasn't to join the program. It was to survive it. Everything else was conditioning." "What will you do now?" Tyler asked. "I have no idea," Rebecca admitted. "For the first time in my adult life, I genuinely don't know what comes next. It's the most frightening and exhilarating feeling I've ever experienced." After she left, the Blackwood family stood alone in the vast warehouse, processing what had just happened. "Is it really over?" Zoe asked. Marcus pulled out Rebecca's communication device. Messages were still coming in, but their tone had changed completely. Instead of operational updates, he was seeing resignation letters, confessions, and requests for help, breaking free from network conditioning. "The organization is finished," he said, "but the work is just beginning. All these people who are waking up from decades of conditioning, they're going to need help figuring out who they really are." Over the following weeks, as the network's collapse made international headlines, Marcus watched his family adapt to their new reality. Tyler threw himself into environmental activism, but this time by organizing student protests and community gardens rather than seeking institutional power. Zoe returned to competitive swimming, but also started tutoring kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, not to recruit them, but simply to help them succeed on their own terms. Linda went back to teaching, but with a new passion for helping students think critically about authority and choice. And Marcus returned to his law practice, where he found himself flooded with clients, former network assets who needed legal help reclaiming their identities and lives. The world didn't suddenly become perfect. Climate change continued. Political dysfunction worsened in some ways, and new crises emerged that might have been prevented by Rebecca's systematic approach. But something else happened too. Communities began solving problems in ways no central authority could have planned. Environmental movements grew organically, driven by genuine passion rather than calculated strategy. Political reforms emerged from citizen initiatives rather than top-down mandates, and children around the world grew up making their own choices about who they wanted to become. 6 months after the network's collapse, Marcus received a letter from Rebecca Pemberton. She was working at a small nonprofit in rural Tennessee, helping connect disadvantaged families with resources and support. Her letter was brief. Marcus, you were right about the messy, inefficient human choice being the only choice worth making. I'm learning to build tree houses with other people, instead of designing perfect structures they have to live in. It's harder than I thought, but infinitely more rewarding. Thank you for giving me the chance to find out who I might have been. Rebecca. On a warm Saturday morning in spring, Marcus stood in his backyard watching Tyler and Zoe work together to repair the old treehouse they'd built years earlier. The structure was indeed lopsided and inefficient, weathered by time and marked by all the hasty decisions and imperfect solutions they'd implemented during its construction. Linda joined him, slipping her hand into his. Any regrets? She asked. Marcus thought about the question seriously. They could have accepted Rebecca's offer. Tyler and Zoe could have been guaranteed success, guided to positions where they could solve major world problems. His family could have been part of a system that actually worked, that actually got things done. Instead, they had chosen uncertainty. Tyler might fail at his environmental work. Zoe might not make it to the Olympics. The world might continue stumbling toward climate disaster despite all their efforts. But as he watched his children laugh together while trying to figure out why one corner of their treehouse was sagging, Marcus realized he had never been more certain of anything in his life. No regrets, he said, squeezing Linda's hand. This is exactly the choice I would make again. Above them, storm clouds were gathering, promising an afternoon of unpredictable weather. But for now, the sun was shining, his family was together, and they were free to build whatever kind of future they could dream up together, even if it was imperfect, even if it was messy, even if it was gloriously, chaotically, beautifully human. In the distance, Marcus could hear other families in other yards, making their own choices about how to spend their Saturday morning. Some of those choices would be wise, others foolish. Some would lead to great success, others to disappointment. But they would all be real choices, made by real people who were free to fail or succeed on their own terms. And in a world full of broken systems and imperfect solutions, that freedom to choose might just be the most perfect thing of all.